Last weekend, I went to see, I think the best way of describing them is burial mounds. Or at least that's the best way of describing them in English. They are known as kohun in Japanese. And there was a point in time when these burial mounds were all over the country, just in loads and loads of places, so many of them. But sadly, lots of them have been lost because they've been destroyed, because they get in the way. So these burial mounds are rather large, sometimes very large mounds. In fact, I should actually explain what a mound is. A mound is sort of like a big collection of something. So you can have a mound, I suppose you can have a mound of sand, although it might sort of break down easily, but you can have a mound of soil. So it's sort of like a hill, but maybe not like a very big one. But anyway, some of these burial mounds are quite big, and so they would get in the way. You know, if you wanted to have a field, you don't want a giant mound in the middle of your field, so people would just, destroy them and carry on creating their fields. So should I actually, do I need to explain burial? Maybe I do. Burial, as in to bury, a person would be buried, or many people. Actually, I'm not sure how many people were buried in these burial mounds. I don't know if it's the case that the bigger the mound, the more people, or maybe it's like the more important someone is, maybe the bigger the mound is. So it's not too dissimilar, I don't think, like the idea. It's not too dissimilar from pyramids. I hope you know what pyramids are. They're those big pyramid-shaped objects in Egypt, and I don't know, do they have them in other parts of the world? I'm not entirely sure. But those were also used as like a burial place. And I think maybe it was the case that maybe the more important you were, the bigger your pyramid was, or something like that. So maybe there was something similar here in Japan with these burial mounds. Anyway, you might be thinking, that's a bit of a weird thing to go and see. A bit of a weird place to go and visit, to look at burial mounds. It's sort of like, almost like visiting a graveyard. Or something like that, isn't it? And I would say not really. The place that I went to was more like a park than anything else, I would say. There were lots of nice places to walk. It was quite big. There were stairs all the way up these huge burial mounds, so you could get to the top of them and stand on the top of them, and you got a nice 360-degree view of the place you were in. And there's quite a lot of nature in this place I was in, and you could see the other burial mounds. There were quite a few of them, and you could just walk around this place and take your time. And it was nice and quiet. It was nice and peaceful. It was far too hot, I have to say. It was about 34 degrees, and I had a sun umbrella, which I think I mentioned recently that I'd purchased from my time when I went to the ocean, and it was too hot even with the sun umbrella. It was just far too hot, and we tried to keep staying in the shade as much as possible, and maybe rest in a little shelter type hut area, and made sure to drink plenty of water, of course, but still it was too hot. Thankfully, this place that we were at, they had a museum that you could enter and spend some time in, and that museum had very, very, very nice air conditioning. In fact, I was at the point where I was so hot that even if I didn't want to see the museum, I think I would have just paid just to go into and stand somewhere cool. I was that hot. I just wanted to get out of it. I needed to get out of the heat. I was beginning to feel a little unwell, to be perfectly honest. But enough about the heat. Like I was saying, this area was very nice. It was more like a park. There were some streams flowing through it. There was lots of grass. There was maybe a bit too much grass, actually. I think at this time of year in Japan, the grass and the plants, they all grow like crazy. They really do. and in a short space of about a month or something, they all go from like looking really nice and tidy to just very, very wild and messy. And I think it's very hard to keep on top of it, like to keep it under control. So we were walking past all of these benches, and it's like, it would be nice to sit under that bench if you could get to it, because you had to walk through this all this really, really long grass to be able to get to the bench. And the grass was at like the same height as the bench itself. So even if you sat down on the bench, it would just feel like you're sort of sitting down in a load of grass. It was that tall. It's just hard when it grows that quickly, and the place is that big. It must be really hard to keep on top of it and keep everything neat. But even so, it was still nice being able to walk amongst all the nature and the grass, lots and lots of grass. There were some ponds as well, but I didn't see any of them, or at least I didn't know that they were actually ponds until I looked at the map. And this map said, like there should be water here and water here and water here. I couldn't see any water because it's not only like the grass that grows like crazy. It's also all of the plants that live in the water. They grow like crazy, and there's so much of them that you can't see any water anymore. It's just covered like this. You wouldn't know. It just looks like a field. That's how many plants there are that grow in the water. Anyway, it was an interesting day out. I think I may have seen some of these burial mounds before. I seem to remember seeing one at this park in Tokyo somewhere, but I can't quite remember where. But it wasn't quite as well preserved as this, because these things are really old. I think they were built sort of around the year 500 AD. So, 1,500 years old or thereabouts. And it was just interesting being in that place where, some activity was going on all those years ago. I suppose I did mention that when I went on my trip to Whitby recently, there was this abbey, which is like a church, and it was all run down. It was all broken. The roof was missing, and just there was a lot of this sort of stonework left, but all the floor was just grass now, and it looked a bit like a set from a film, maybe like Lord of the Rings or something, when they're wandering around some ruins, some ancient ruins of some like old civilization that was no longer around. It was a bit like that, but I do enjoy sort of standing there and just sort of like thinking, like, wouldn't it be interesting to see when this church was just built, when it was brand new, and well, not church, the abbey, but when it was brand new, and what it must have looked like. And it was a similar feeling, just reading about the history of these burial mounds. And one thing that caught my eye, one thing that I found rather interesting, was this sword that they'd found inside one of these like burial chambers. Like inside these burial mounds, there are burial chambers where they would lie the person who had passed away, and they'd leave like loads of sort of treasure with them, like swords and arrows, like weapons and jewelry and clay sort of pottery figures, and all kinds of things would be left there. But anyway, this one sword that they'd found, I think when they were cleaning it, they were able to find some writing on it. And it was Japanese writing, obviously. And I asked my wife, can you read this? And she said no. She could not read any of it at all. Or maybe like one or two characters were familiar. Some of them she'd never seen before. But like overall, she couldn't understand what was written on it, which I find really interesting. To think that in just like 1,500 years, well, actually just 1,500 years is a very long time, but to think like how much a language can change in that time, I think is very interesting. Like the Japanese of then is not the Japanese of now. And if any of you have ever for some reason tried to read some old books in like an older version of English, like Shakespeare, for example, you will see that the English of then is definitely not the English of now either, and it is a bit hard to understand. But anyway, before they had discovered these swords with this writing on, they actually thought that people living in Japan at that point in time couldn't read or write. I mean, they could speak, they had a language, but they thought they didn't know how to write and they didn't know how to read. And when they found these swords, they were like, oh, okay, so we must have been very wrong then. People obviously did know how to read and write 1,500 years ago in Japan. So yeah, it's sort of interesting. It's interesting how these like artifacts, these things that we can find from the past that can survive so long. I mean, it's really impressive how well defined these characters were on the sword. Like the whole sword just looked covered in rust. It didn't look like a sword at all. You would just think it was just this, I don't know, this lump of rusty metal. But underneath somehow all of this sort of like gold, these Japanese characters had survived. So yeah, it is interesting how these finds, these artifacts, these things from the past can change our understanding of the past, I suppose. Anyway, that was mostly my weekend. I did go to, they had like it was like a gift shop twinned with a restaurant cafe thing, I would say. So there's this, you could buy like little gift items and snacks and I don't know, like food to give to people as a gift. And you could also get like coffee and ice cream and some food there as well. And as it was really hot, my wife purchased an ice cream and enjoyed eating that. And I bought a little clay figure with a cute face because I happen to like them. It's like this little dancing clay figure man. I should probably upload a picture of it so you can see what I'm on about. But I tend to be attracted towards things with an unusual, funny-looking face. I don't know why. I think that's something to do with my childhood, but I'm not exactly sure. But there you go. You know, I look at it, it makes me happy. You know, it's a simple joy of life. Anyway, until next time, bye-bye.